The rain hammered against the windows of my riverside mansion that Tuesday evening when everything changed forever. I was sitting in my favorite armchair, the one Marcus had given me for my 60th birthday, when I heard the front door slam open with an urgency that made my heart race. Heavy footsteps echoed through the marble hallway, multiple pairs of feet moving with purpose toward my living room. Thank you for watching Granny's Narrative. Please subscribe and tell us where you are watching from. Marcus appeared first, my only son, the child I had sacrificed everything for. Behind him came his wife Victoria, her designer heels clicking against the floor like tiny hammers of judgment. And bringing up the rear was Victoria's mother Helen, dragging two massive suitcases that left scuff marks on my pristine floors. I am Catherine Brennan, 70 years old, founder and owner of Brennan Fine Jewelry, a company that grew from a single small shop in downtown Portland to a chain of 15 luxury stores across the Pacific Northwest. My late husband Thomas and I built this empire together, brick by brick, sacrifice by sacrifice. When he died 8 years ago from complications during what should have been a routine surgery, I thought I had experienced the deepest pain possible. I was wrong. Marcus stood in the center of my living room, not meeting my eyes. His jaw set in that stubborn way he had inherited from his father. But unlike Thomas, who used that stubbornness to push through business challenges and protect his family, Marcus wielded it like a weapon against the very person who had given him life. "We need to stay here for a while," he announced, his voice flat and emotionless. "Victoria and I lost our condo. The bank took it last week." My mind raced, trying to process this information. Just 3 months earlier, I had given Marcus $50,000 to help with their mortgage payments. He had looked me straight in the eye and promised it would solve all their problems, that they were just going through a temporary rough patch because of Victoria's supposed medical expenses. "What happened to the money I gave you?" I asked, keeping my voice steady even as my hands trembled in my lap. Victoria stepped forward, flipping her perfectly highlighted hair over her shoulder. Her expression held that mixture of disdain and fake sweetness I had come to recognize over the years. "Medical bills, Mother Catherine," she said, using that condescending tone she always employed with me. "You know how expensive healthcare is these days." But I knew the truth. I had seen the Instagram posts of their weekend trip to Las Vegas, the photos of expensive dinners at exclusive restaurants, the shopping bags from boutiques where a single purse cost more than most people made in a month. Victoria had never been sick. The only illness she suffered from was an insatiable appetite for luxury funded by other people's money. Helen cleared her throat, a sound like gravel in a garbage disposal. "Catherine, we appreciate you being so understanding. It will only be for a few weeks until we get back on our feet. I promise you will barely notice we are here. 3 adults moving into a 70-year-old woman's home. And I would barely notice. The absurdity would have been laughable if it were not so painful. But I looked at my son, at the dark circles under his eyes that spoke of stress and shame, and something inside me softened against my better judgment. "Course you can stay," I heard myself say. "The guest rooms on the 2nd floor are ready. You can settle in there." Victoria's nose wrinkled as if she had smelled something rotten. "The 2nd floor. But Mother Catherine, those rooms are so small and outdated. Surely you do not need that enormous master suite all to yourself. It has that beautiful sitting area and the walk-in closet that is practically the size of an apartment." I felt the blood drain from my face. My master bedroom. The room I had shared with Thomas for 30 years. The room where we had whispered our dreams to each other in the dark. The room where I had held him during his final days, where his scent still lingered faintly on his favorite reading chair. "That is my private space," I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. Marcus finally looked at me then, and what I saw in his eyes made my stomach turn. It was not the loving gaze of a son. It was calculation, assessment, the look of someone measuring the value of an object they planned to acquire. "Mom, be reasonable," he said, taking a step closer. "You are alone in that huge room. Victoria needs space for her clothes and beauty products. It makes more sense for you to take one of the smaller rooms. You barely use all that closet space anyway." Helen nodded vigorously, her jowls shaking with the movement. "He is absolutely right, Catherine. At our age we need to be practical. Downsizing is healthy. Helps us let go of material attachments. I opened my mouth to protest, to tell them that my age had nothing to do with my right to my own bedroom, to explain that some things were not about practicality but about memory and love and the sacred spaces we create in our homes. But the words stuck in my throat as I looked at the three faces staring at me with varying degrees of impatience and entitlement. I will think about it, I finally said, knowing even as I spoke that my thinking would not matter. The invasion had already begun. That night, lying alone in my master bedroom, I stared at the ceiling and wondered how everything had gone so wrong. Marcus had not always been this way. As a child, he had been sensitive and kind, always the first to help a classmate in need or defend someone being bullied. He had dreams of becoming a marine biologist, spending hours at the aquarium sketching sea creatures and talking excitedly about ocean conservation. But something changed in his late 20s. Maybe it was the influence of his friends who were making fortunes in tech and finance. Maybe it was the pressure he felt living in the shadow of his father's success. Or maybe, I had to admit with painful honesty, it was my fault for always cushioning his falls, for never letting him experience the real consequences of his choices. Thomas had tried to warn me. "Our son needs to struggle a little, sweetheart," he had said during one of our late-night conversations. "If we keep catching him every time he stumbles, he will never learn to stand on his own 2 feet. But I had argued that a parent's job was to protect their children, to make their path easier than ours had been. I had written checks and made phone calls and smoothed over problems, always believing that my love and support would somehow transform my son into the man I hoped he would become. Now, at 70 years old, I was paying the price for that naive belief. The next morning, I woke to the sound of furniture being moved. I rushed out of my bedroom to find Victoria directing 2 men in moving uniforms as they carried my antique dresser out of the master bedroom and down the hallway. "What is happening here?" I demanded, my voice shaking with a mixture of confusion and anger. Victoria turned to me with a bright smile that never reached her eyes. "Oh, good morning, Mother Catherine. I took the liberty of hiring movers to help us reorganize. You were sleeping so peacefully. I did not want to disturb you. We have already moved your essentials to the blue guest room at the end of the hall. It is really quite cozy." "But I never agreed to this," I said, watching helplessly as the movers disappeared around the corner with furniture that held 40 years of memories. Marcus emerged from my former bedroom, carrying an armload of my clothes still on their hangers. "Mom, we talked about this last night. You said you would think about it, and we decided to go ahead and make the change to save time. You will love the blue room. It has that nice view of the garden. I said I would think about it, not that you could take over my bedroom without my permission." He sighed, that long-suffering sound people make when dealing with someone they find unreasonable. "Look, we are here now. The movers are here. Everything is already in motion. Can we just not make this difficult? You are not even using most of that space, and Victoria really needs it." Helen appeared then, holding a box of my personal items. She set it down on the hallway table with a thud that made me wince. "Catherine, you need to understand that families make sacrifices for each other. When I was your age, I gave up my sewing room so my daughter's family could have more space. It is what we do. But this is my house," I said, hating how small and weak my voice sounded. "I built this life. I should have a say in how my own home is organized." The 3 of them exchanged looks, the kind of meaningful glances people share when dealing with someone they consider difficult or irrational. That was the moment I realized something chilling. They had already decided I was becoming incompetent. They had already begun constructing a narrative in which I was confused, forgetful, unable to make sound decisions. And I, standing there in my bathrobe at 7 in the morning, watching strangers carry away pieces of my life, had done nothing to stop them. The weeks that followed were a masterclass in gradual displacement. Every day brought new changes, new invasions of my space and autonomy. Victoria redecorated the living room, replacing my carefully curated collection of artwork with prints she bought at a big box store because they matched the couch better. Helen took over my kitchen, rearranging everything according to her system and tooting disapprovingly whenever I could not find the coffee mugs that had been moved to a different cabinet for the 3rd time that week. But the worst violations were the small, personal ones. My jewelry began to disappear. First, it was a diamond bracelet Thomas had given me for our 20th anniversary. Then a pair of sapphire earrings I had inherited from my mother. When I asked about them, Marcus looked at me with exaggerated concern. "Are you sure you did not misplace them, Mom? You have been forgetting things lately. Last week you could not remember where you put your reading glasses, and they were on top of your head the whole time." The reading glasses incident had been a single moment of distraction, the kind everyone experiences regardless of age. But now it was being used as evidence of a pattern, proof of my declining mental capacity. I also noticed money disappearing from my wallet. $50 here, $100 there. My credit card statements showed charges at restaurants I had never visited, stores I had never shopped at. When I brought this up during dinner one evening, Victoria had the audacity to look offended. "Mother Catherine, we are buying groceries for the household. Surely you do not expect us to pay for food when we are staying in your home. Besides, you have so much money saved up. What is the point of hoarding it at this stage of your life?" At this stage of your life. The phrase hung in the air like a threat. What they really meant was, before you die and we inherit everything anyway, so why not let us enjoy it now? I began to understand that this was not just about needing a place to stay. This was a calculated plan to take control of everything I had worked for, everything Thomas and I had built together. And the most heartbreaking part was that my own son, the baby I had nursed through countless sleepless nights, the child whose scraped knees I had bandaged and whose broken hearts I had mended, was leading the charge. One afternoon, I came home early from the jewelry store to find Helen sitting at my desk in the small office I had set up in the library. She was going through my financial documents, actually had my bank statements spread out in front of her, making notes on a yellow legal pad. "What are you doing with my private papers?" I asked, unable to keep the tremor out of my voice. She looked up, not even having the grace to appear embarrassed at being caught. "Oh, Catherine, I am just trying to help organize your finances. Marcus mentioned that you have been having trouble keeping track of things, and I used to do bookkeeping for my late husband's business. I thought I could be of assistance." I walked over and gathered up the papers, holding them against my chest like a shield. "I have an accountant who handles my finances. I do not need help. But do you really understand what all these numbers mean?" Helen asked, her voice dripping with false concern. "These investment portfolios can be so confusing. It would be terrible if you made a mistake and lost money because you did not understand what you were signing." "I understand my finances perfectly well," I said firmly. "And I need you to never go through my personal documents again without my explicit permission." Helen stood up, her expression hardening. "Well, if that is how you feel, fine. I was only trying to help. But do not come crying to us when you get confused and make some terrible financial decision." After she left the room, I sat down in my desk chair, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the papers. I went through them carefully and discovered she had been making notes about my assets, tallying up the value of my properties, my investments, my business. She had even circled the estimated worth of my jewelry collection with 3 exclamation points. They were taking inventory. They were cataloging everything they planned to take. That night I could not sleep. I lay in the small blue guest room, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling, listening to the sounds of Marcus and Victoria laughing in my former bedroom. Their voices carried through the walls, and what I heard made my blood run cold. "The lawyer said we need more evidence," Helen was saying. "Documentation that she cannot manage her affairs. Unpaid bills, missed appointments, signs of confusion." There was a pause, and then I heard my son's voice, the voice I had once found so comforting. "Can we create some of that evidence? What if we intercepted some of her mail, made sure a few bills went unpaid? Then we could point to it as proof she is not handling her responsibilities." Victoria giggled, actually giggled at the idea of sabotaging me. "That is brilliant, baby. And I could start telling people how worried we are about her. Maybe mention it to some of her friends at the club. Plant the seeds, you know." "What about the business?" Marcus asked. "Once we get conservatorship, we can sell Brennan fine jewelry to that corporate chain that has been trying to buy her out for years. The offer was for $8 million. Split 3 ways, that is enough for all of us to live very comfortably." My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst through my chest. They were not just planning to take control of my personal assets. They were planning to sell my company, the business I had spent 45 years building, the legacy I had hoped to leave to my son to carry on with pride and care. But we have to be careful, Helen cautioned. If she gets suspicious and fights back, it could ruin everything. We need her to trust us, to think we are helping her. Once we have the conservatorship in place, it will not matter what she wants. Legally, she will have no say. I got out of bed and walked to the window, looking out at the garden Thomas had designed so many years ago. The rose bushes he had planted were blooming, their petals luminous in the moonlight. Thomas, I whispered to the night air. What should I do? How do I fight back against my own child? The answer came to me slowly, crystallizing in my mind like ice forming on a winter pond. If they wanted to play chess with my life, then I would have to become a better player. I would have to be smarter, more strategic, more ruthless than they ever expected a 70-year-old woman to be. I would not confront them directly. That would only push them to accelerate their plans. Instead, I would let them believe they were winning. I would play the role of the confused, elderly woman they expected to see. And while they congratulated themselves on their cleverness, I would be building my own plan, brick by brick, until I was ready to bring their entire scheme crashing down around them. The next morning I started my performance. When Helen asked me if I had taken my medications, I pretended to be uncertain. When Victoria mentioned a conversation we supposedly had the day before, I acted confused about the details. When Marcus brought up business decisions, I deferred to him with apparent gratitude. Thank goodness you are here to help me understand all this, I said, watching his face light up with satisfaction. I do not know what I would do without you. But behind the facade of the befuddled old woman, my mind was working furiously. I began documenting everything. I kept a detailed journal hidden in the garden shed, recording every conversation, every suspicious incident, every piece of evidence of their scheme. I started carrying a small voice recorder in my pocket, capturing their unguarded conversations when they thought I was napping or out of the room. I also reached out to the people I trusted most in the world. My daughter Rebecca, who lived in Boston with her family. My best friend Margaret, who had been my confidant since college. And most importantly, my attorney David Goldstein, who had handled my legal affairs for 30 years. Each call was made in secret, from pay phones or borrowed cell phones, always when I was supposedly at the grocery store or the doctor's office. I could not risk Marcus finding evidence of these communications on my own phone records. Rebecca was the first person I told everything to. Her reaction was exactly what I expected from the daughter who had always been level-headed and fiercely protective of the people she loved. "Mom, this is elder abuse," she said, her voice shaking with anger. "You need to call the police right now. We need to get them out of your house before they do any more damage." "No," I said firmly. "If I involve the police now, it becomes a public scandal. It will damage the business reputation. It will become fodder for the gossip mill. I want them out of my life, but I want to do it in a way that protects everything your father and I built." "Then what is your plan?" Rebecca asked. "I am going to beat them at their own game," I replied. "And I am going to need your help to do it." Over the next few weeks, I had similar conversations with Margaret and David. Each of them was shocked, outraged, and ultimately supportive of what I was planning. Together, we began to construct a plan that was both brilliant and audacious, a plan that would not only protect me but would turn the tables so completely that Marcus, Victoria, and Helen would never see it coming. The first step was securing my mental competency with irrefutable documentation. David arranged for me to be evaluated by 3 different specialists, a neurologist, a psychiatrist, and a geriatric medicine expert. Each appointment was scheduled under the guise of routine checkups, nothing that would raise Marcus's suspicions. The results were exactly what I expected. All 3 doctors certified that I was in excellent mental health, with no signs of cognitive decline whatsoever. Dr. Patricia Warner, the neurologist, even commented that my memory and processing speed were better than most 50-year-olds she examined. "These reports will be your shield," David explained as we sat in his office reviewing the documents. If they try to pursue conservatorship, these evaluations will stop them cold. But we need to go further. We need to make sure they cannot touch your assets even if they somehow manage to get a temporary order. That is where the second part of the plan came in. Selling Brennan fine jewelry. The very thought made me feel physically ill. The company was my baby, my proudest achievement outside of raising my children. But David was right. If the company was sold before they could get their hands on it, there would be nothing for them to take. I reached out to Maxwell Green, the CEO of Heritage Luxury Goods, a company that had been trying to acquire Brennan fine jewelry for years. Maxwell was a principled businessman who understood the value of craftsmanship and legacy. Unlike the corporate chain Marcus wanted to sell to, Maxwell would preserve the Brennan name and protect the jobs of my employees. The negotiations happened in complete secrecy. We met in hotel conference rooms, communicated through encrypted emails, kept everything off the books until we had a finalized contract. Maxwell's offer was generous, almost $9 million, and it included provisions that I found essential to my peace of mind. The Brennan name would remain. My master jeweler Thomas Chen, who had been with me for 20 years, would continue as creative director, and I would stay on as a special consultant for 5 years, ensuring the transition honored everything my late husband and I had built. The third component of my plan was perhaps the most emotionally significant. My riverside mansion, the home where I had raised my children and shared a lifetime with Thomas, would be donated to Silver Haven, a non-profit organization that provided housing and care for elderly people who had been abused or abandoned by their families. The irony was not lost on me. The house where I had suffered daily humiliations and seen my autonomy slowly stripped away would become a sanctuary for others in similar situations. Where there had been cruelty and calculation, there would now be compassion and dignity. Director Patricia Morrison of Silver Haven wept when I told her of my plans. Mrs. Brennan, this is the most generous gift our organization has ever received. Do you have any idea how many lives this will change? Just make sure it becomes official 48 hours after my public announcement, I told her. I do not want any chance of interference. With all the pieces in place, we set the date for the grand reveal. The annual Brennan Fine Jewelry Gala, scheduled for the last Saturday in October, would be the perfect venue. 200 guests would be in attendance, including business leaders, community figures, society reporters, and many of the people who had known me and my family for decades. Marcus, Victoria, and Helen were thrilled about the gala. They had been dropping hints to anyone who would listen that they were taking on more responsibilities in the business, that I was gradually stepping back and trusting them with the company's future. They saw the gala as their coming-out party, the event where they would solidify their position as my heirs apparent. They had no idea it would be the stage for their complete and total downfall. In the final weeks before the gala, I had to endure their increasingly bold attempts to establish control. Victoria threw away my clothes, claiming they were outdated and embarrassing, and replaced them with outfits she chose. Helen took over all the household accounts, insisting I was too confused to manage them properly. Marcus actually had the audacity to bring a notary to the house with papers that would give him power of attorney over my finances. "Mom, this is just a formality," he said, pushing the documents across the kitchen table toward me. "It will make everything easier. I can take care of all the boring paperwork so you do not have to worry about it." I looked at those papers, at the legal language that would have stripped away my autonomy and given my son control over every dollar I had earned through decades of hard work and careful management. For a moment, I felt a wave of such profound sadness I thought I might drown in it. This man sitting across from me, looking at me with fake concern and real greed, was the same little boy who used to climb into my lap when he had nightmares and tell me I was the bravest person in the world. How had we gotten here? What had I done wrong? Or what had I failed to do that would have prevented this moment? But I could not afford to indulge in that sadness now. So I put on my confused old lady act and said, "Oh sweetie, this is a lot to take in. Let me have my lawyer look at it first. You know how complicated these legal things can be." Marcus's jaw tightened with frustration, but he forced a smile. "Of course. Have David look at it. But do not take too long, okay? These things are time-sensitive." The papers went directly to David's office, where they were photocopied and filed as evidence of attempted financial exploitation. David also drafted a preemptive legal motion that would be filed immediately if Marcus tried to pursue any kind of conservatorship or power of attorney without my consent. Meanwhile, I kept playing my part perfectly. I pretended to be grateful for their help. I acted confused about small things like where I left my keys or what day of the week it was. I let them believe they were succeeding, that the frail, incompetent old woman they needed me to be was exactly who I was becoming. But every night, in the privacy of the blue guest room they had relegated me to, I reviewed my plans with the cold precision of a general preparing for battle. I listened to the recordings I had made, documenting their schemes and their casual cruelty. I read through the legal documents that would protect me. I rehearsed what I would say at the gala, making sure every word would have maximum impact. The morning of the gala arrived with perfect autumn weather. The sky was clear and bright, the air crisp with the promise of change. I woke early and lay in bed for a moment, thinking about everything that was about to happen. Today was the day I would reclaim my life. Today was the day I would show my son that underestimating me had been his biggest mistake. Today was the day I would prove that being 70 years old did not make me weak or confused or easy to manipulate. I got dressed in the outfit I had hidden in Rebecca's car trunk the week before. A stunning emerald green gown that Thomas had always said brought out the color of my eyes. I did my own makeup and hair, taking my time to get everything perfect. When I looked in the mirror, I saw not a frail old woman but a warrior preparing for battle. Downstairs, I could hear Victoria and Helen getting ready, their excited chatter echoing through the house. They were looking forward to this evening, to the moment they thought would cement their position as the future of Brennan Fine Jewelry. They had already started telling people that I was getting too old to run the company, that it was time for fresh blood and new ideas. What they did not know was that the fresh blood would not be theirs. We arrived at the Riverside Hotel ballroom at 7 in the evening. The space had been transformed into a glittering showcase of elegance, with hundreds of candles casting a warm glow over displays of Brennan Fine Jewelry pieces. 200 guests milled about, champagne flutes in hand, admiring the jewelry and socializing with the ease of people who belonged to Portland's elite circles. Marcus, Victoria, and Helen immediately began working the room, introducing themselves to important guests, laughing too loudly, touching people's arms with fake familiarity. I watched them from a distance and felt nothing but a cold, calm determination. Rebecca found me near the entrance and squeezed my hand. "Are you ready for this, Mom?" "More ready than I have ever been for anything," I replied. At 8 o'clock, the lights dimmed and a spotlight illuminated the small stage at the front of the ballroom. The master of ceremonies, a local news anchor we had hired for the evening, stepped up to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, if you could all gather round, we are ready to begin this evening's program. It is my great pleasure to introduce the founder and CEO of Brennan Fine Jewelry, Catherine Brennan." I walked toward the stage with my head held high, conscious of every eye in the room following my progress. I could see the looks of surprise on some faces. They had been hearing for weeks that I was declining, becoming forgetful and confused. But the woman walking confidently toward that stage, wearing an elegant gown and holding herself with regal bearing, was anything but incompetent. Marcus looked nervous. He should be. I reached the microphone and took a moment to look out at the assembled guests, people who had been part of my journey for decades. Some of them had bought their first piece of fine jewelry from me when I was running a single small shop downtown. Others had commissioned custom pieces to mark the most important moments of their lives. These people knew me, knew my character and my capabilities. And they were about to learn the truth about what had been happening in my home. "Good evening, everyone," I began, my voice clear and strong. "Thank you for joining me tonight to celebrate 45 years of Brennan Fine Jewelry. When my husband Thomas and I opened our first store in 1978, we had more dreams than money and more hope than experience. But we had something else too. We had integrity." I paused, letting that word hang in the air. Integrity. The quality Marcus had apparently learned nothing about despite growing up in a household where it was valued above profit or prestige. "Tonight," I continued, "I want to talk to you about legacy. About what we leave behind when we are gone. About the difference between building something of value and simply grabbing whatever we can get our hands on. I could see confusion spreading through the crowd. This was not the typical anniversary speech full of nostalgia and thanks. This was something else entirely, and people were starting to sense it. Some of you may have heard rumors recently about my health, about my mental state. You may have been told that I am becoming forgetful, confused, unable to manage my own affairs. I want to address those rumors directly. Behind me, a large screen descended from the ceiling. I had arranged for this special equipment to be installed earlier that day, telling the venue staff it was for a presentation about the company's history. That was not entirely a lie. It was about history, just not the kind Marcus would want displayed. I have recently been evaluated by 3 independent medical specialists, I continued. A neurologist, a psychiatrist, and a geriatric medicine expert. All 3 have certified that I am in excellent mental and physical health, with no signs of cognitive decline whatsoever. The screen behind me lit up, displaying the official medical reports with their conclusions highlighted. I heard gasps from the audience as they read the doctor's emphatic statements about my competency. So where did these rumors about my mental decline originate? Asked my voice hardening. Me show you. I gave a signal, and the screen changed to show a video recording. It was footage from my living room, captured by one of the hidden cameras I had installed. The audio quality was crystal clear as Marcus's voice filled the ballroom. "We need more evidence that she is incompetent," he was saying on the screen. "What if we intercepted her mail, made sure some bills went unpaid? We could point to it as proof she is not handling her responsibilities." The gasps in the audience turned to horrified murmurs. I glanced at Marcus and saw that all the color had drained from his face. Victoria was clutching his arm, her own face twisted in panic. Helen was looking around desperately, as if searching for an exit. But I was not done yet. The video continued, showing a different conversation. Victoria was speaking this time, her voice bright with malicious glee. "I will start telling people how worried we are about her. Maybe mention it to some of her friends at the club. Plant the seeds, you know." And then the final clip, the one that would leave no doubt about their intentions. Marcus leaning forward, speaking with the cold calculation of someone plotting theft. "Once we get conservatorship, we can sell Brennan fine jewelry. The offer is for $8 million. Split 3 ways, that is enough for all of us to live very comfortably." I stopped the video and turned back to the audience. The silence was deafening. No one moved. No one spoke. 200 pairs of eyes were fixed on me. And then slowly, inevitably, they turned toward Marcus, Victoria, and Helen. "My own son," I said, and I let my voice crack just a little, showing the pain beneath the strength. "The child I raised, the boy I sacrificed everything for, tried to have me declared incompetent so he could steal my life's work." Marcus tried to speak, his mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air, but no words came out. What could he possibly say? The evidence was irrefutable, captured in his own voice, displayed for everyone who mattered in Portland society to see and hear. Fortunately, I continued, regaining my composure. I was able to take steps to protect myself and my company. "I am pleased to announce that as of yesterday, Brennan Fine Jewelry has been acquired by Heritage Luxury Goods in a transaction that will ensure the preservation of our name, our values, and our commitment to craftsmanship." More gasps, but these were different. These were sounds of surprise and interest rather than horror. Maxwell Green stood up from his seat in the front row and gave me a small nod of acknowledgement. "The sale was finalized yesterday afternoon," I explained. "All funds have been transferred to secure accounts that are protected against any claims or legal challenges. The Brennan name will continue. Our employees will keep their jobs. And I will remain as a special consultant to ensure our legacy is honored." I could see Marcus's brain working, trying to calculate if there was any way to salvage the situation, any angle he had missed. But there was none. I had been thorough. Every door he might have tried to open was locked and barred. "There is one more announcement I would like to make," I said. "My home, the Riverside mansion where I have lived for 40 years, will be donated to Silver Haven, a non-profit organization that provides housing for elderly individuals who have been abused or abandoned by their families. The irony of this was not lost on anyone in the room. A wave of whispers spread through the crowd. The official transfer will take place on Monday morning, I continued, which gives the current occupants of the house 48 hours to remove their belongings. After that, the property will be transformed into a place where seniors are treated with the dignity and respect they deserve. I paused and looked directly at Marcus, Victoria, and Helen. The funny thing about greed is that it blinds you to the resources and resolve of the people you are trying to victimize. You saw a 70-year-old woman and assumed that meant weakness. You mistook my love and kindness for stupidity. You thought that because I am old I would be easy to manipulate and control. My voice grew stronger, filled with the righteous anger I had been suppressing for months. But I am Catherine Brennan. I built a multi-million-dollar company from nothing. I navigated 45 years in the competitive world of luxury retail. I raised 2 children, buried a husband, survived economic recessions and market crashes and every other challenge life threw at me. Did you really think I would not see through your pathetic scheme? The room erupted in applause. Slow at first, then building to a thunder that filled the ballroom. People were standing, some wiping tears from their eyes, others shaking their heads in amazement and approval. I saw my friends from the Chamber of Commerce cheering. I saw my employees from the jewelry stores with looks of fierce pride on their faces. I saw Rebecca standing in the back, crying and clapping and mouthing the words "I love you." And I saw Marcus, Victoria, and Helen pushing through the crowd toward the exit, their heads down, their faces flushed with shame and fury. Security guards I had hired for the evening followed discreetly, ensuring they left the premises without causing a scene. Before they could reach the doors, David Goldstein stepped in front of them, holding a folder of documents. "These are for you," he said in a voice loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "Eviction notices giving you 48 hours to vacate the property. Also included is a restraining order preventing any of you from coming within 500 feet of Catherine Brennan or any Brennan fine jewelry location. Any attempt to contact Mrs. Brennan or contest these orders will result in immediate legal action." Marcus finally found his voice. "Mom, please. We can talk about this. You do not understand. We were only trying to help you." The audacity of that statement, spoken in front of 200 witnesses who had just watched video evidence of his conspiracy, was almost impressive in its shamelessness. "Help me," I repeated, and my voice cut through the murmurs of the crowd like a blade. "You were helping me by plotting to declare me incompetent, by planning to steal my company, by treating me like an inconvenient obstacle in your path to my money." Victoria burst into tears, loud theatrical sobs that might have been convincing if everyone had not just seen her on video laughing about manipulating me. Helen put her arm around Victoria and glared at me with pure hatred. "You will regret this, Catherine," Helen hissed. "We will fight you in court. We will tell everyone how you manipulated and confused Marcus. We will make sure the world knows what kind of vindictive, bitter woman you really are." David stepped forward, his expression calm but his voice carrying the weight of legal authority. "I would strongly advise against that course of action, Mrs. Patterson. We have 6 months of documented evidence of elder abuse, financial exploitation, and conspiracy to commit fraud. If you pursue any legal action or attempt to defame Mrs. Brennan publicly, we will file criminal charges. The district attorney has already reviewed the evidence and is prepared to prosecute if necessary." Helen's face went from red with anger to pale with fear. She grabbed Victoria's arm and pulled her toward the exit. Marcus lingered for one more moment, looking at me with an expression I could not quite read. Was it shame, regret, or just calculation about whether there was any way to salvage the situation? "Goodbye, Marcus," I said quietly. "I will always love the boy you once were. I will always mourn the man you could have become. But I will not sacrifice my dignity, my security, or my legacy to enable the person you have chosen to be." He opened his mouth, closed it again, and then turned and walked out of the ballroom. The doors swung shut behind the 3 of them, and it felt like the final page of a painful chapter of my life had been turned. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of congratulations and commiseration. People I had known for decades came up to me with tears in their eyes, sharing their own stories of family betrayal and financial exploitation by relatives who saw elderly parents as nothing more than bank accounts to be drained. Maxwell Green gave a beautiful speech about his commitment to preserving the Brennan legacy and honoring the craftsmanship that had made the company respected throughout the Pacific Northwest. Rebecca stayed by my side the entire evening, her hand in mine, occasionally squeezing it when the emotion threatened to overwhelm me. My daughter had always been my rock, the child who inherited not just Thomas's intelligence but his fundamental decency and integrity. Later, as the guests began to leave and the waitstaff started cleaning up, Margaret found me sitting at a table in the corner, staring at the empty stage where I had delivered the most important speech of my life. "You did it, Kathy," she said, using the nickname only my oldest friends were allowed. "You actually pulled it off. I'm so proud of you." "I do not feel victorious," I admitted. "I feel sad and exhausted and angry that it had to come to this." Margaret sat down beside me and took my hand. "You know what the worst part of getting old is? It is not the aches and pains or the gray hair or any of the physical changes. It is the way some people start to see you as less than human. As if reaching a certain age means you lose your right to dignity and respect and autonomy." She was right, of course. That was exactly what Marcus, Victoria, and Helen had done. They had looked at me and seen not a person with feelings and rights and decades of experience and wisdom, but an obstacle to be removed, a resource to be exploited, a problem to be solved. "But they underestimated you," Margaret continued. "They forgot that being old does not mean being weak. Experience is power, Kathy. Knowledge is strength. And you had both in abundance." I smiled at her, feeling some of the tightness in my chest begin to ease. "You are right. And maybe that is the real lesson in all of this. We should never let anyone make us feel diminished because of our age. Every year we survive, every challenge we overcome, every loss we endure and continue living after, it all adds up to make us stronger, not weaker." "Damn right," Margaret said with a fierce nod. "Now come on. Rebecca has your things waiting in her car. You are coming to stay with me until your new place is ready." My new place. Another piece of the plan I had put into motion during those months of secret preparation. I had purchased a beautiful condominium in the Pearl District, a modern space with floor-to-ceiling windows and views of the city skyline. It was being furnished even as we spoke, transformed from an empty shell into a home that would be entirely mine, untainted by memories of betrayal. The next morning, I woke up in Margaret's guest room to sunshine streaming through the windows and the smell of fresh coffee wafting up from downstairs. For the first time in months, I had slept through the entire night without waking in panic, without lying in the darkness wondering what new humiliation the next day would bring. I checked my phone and found dozens of messages. Some were from friends who had attended the gala, offering support and congratulations. Others were from business associates expressing shock and admiration for how I had handled the situation. There was even a message from a reporter at the Portland Tribune asking if I would be willing to do an interview about elder abuse and financial exploitation. But there was nothing from Marcus. No apology, no explanation, no attempt to justify his actions or beg for forgiveness. Part of me was relieved. What could he possibly say that would make any difference? But another part of me, the part that was still a mother despite everything, felt a hollow ache at the complete silence. Rebecca came over late in the morning with boxes of my personal belongings she had retrieved from the Riverside mansion. She looked tired, her eyes puffy from crying. "Marcus was there when I went to pack up your things," she said, setting the boxes down in Margaret's living room. "He tried to talk to me to explain. He said Victoria pressured him into it, that he never wanted things to go so far, that he still loves you." I felt a flash of anger so intense it surprised me. Blaming Victoria now. After we all watched him on video planning to steal my company. After months of him treating me like I was incompetent and in the way. "I know," Rebecca said quickly. "You know. I told him that love is not just words, it is actions. And his actions showed exactly how much he values you." He did not have much to say to that. We spent the afternoon going through the boxes, sorting my belongings. Some things would go to my new condominium. Others would be donated or thrown away. As I handled each object, each piece of my life, I found myself reflecting on the choices that had led me to this moment. Had I been wrong to always bail Marcus out when he failed? Had I done him a disservice by never letting him face real consequences? Thomas had tried to warn me, had tried to get me to see that our son needed to struggle and fail and learn from his mistakes. But I had been so determined to protect him from pain that I had never taught him resilience. Or maybe it was not about my parenting at all. Maybe Marcus was simply one of those people who would always choose the easy way, who would always look for someone else to blame and someone else to support him. Maybe some character flaws run too deep to be fixed by better parenting or tougher love. I will never know the answer to those questions, and I had to accept that. The next few weeks passed in a strange mixture of closure and new beginnings. On Monday morning, exactly 48 hours after the gala, ownership of the Riverside Mansion officially transferred to Silver Haven. Director Patricia Morrison gave me a personal tour of how they planned to transform the space, showing me architectural drawings of bedrooms being converted into comfortable suites and the large dining room being set up for communal meals and activities. This library will become a reading room and learning center, Patricia explained, gesturing to the space where Helen had once been caught going through my financial documents. We will offer classes in art, music, creative writing, anything that helps our residents feel engaged and valued. I felt tears prick my eyes. Something beautiful was being born from the ashes of my pain. The house where I had felt so diminished would now be a place where other elderly people would be lifted up and celebrated. My new condominium in the Pearl District was ready by mid-November. Rebecca and Margaret helped me move in, and I found myself delighting in the process of creating a new home. Every piece of furniture was chosen intentionally. Every color scheme reflected my personal taste, not compromises made to accommodate other people's preferences. Every corner of the space was mine and mine alone. I set up my favorite armchair by the windows where I could look out over the city. I hung the photographs of Thomas and my children from happier times. I filled the bookshelves with my beloved collection of first editions and histories and novels that had sustained me through different phases of my life. "This is good," I told Rebecca as we stood in the living room on moving day, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes but already feeling the rightness of the space. "This is really good." The business transition with Heritage Luxury Goods went smoothly. Maxwell Green proved to be everything I had hoped, a thoughtful leader who respected the Brennan legacy while bringing new energy and ideas to the company. My employees were thriving under his management, and several of them told me privately how relieved they were that Marcus would not be taking over. We all knew he did not care about the craftsmanship, one of my longtime sales associates confided. He only ever saw the jewelry as commodities to be moved as quickly as possible. Mr. Green actually understands why people fall in love with these pieces. I continued my work as a consultant, visiting the stores regularly and maintaining relationships with our most valued clients. But I also had time now for other things. I joined a book club that met weekly at a local coffee shop. I took a watercolor painting class at the community college. I started volunteering at a legal aid clinic that helped elderly people navigate issues of financial exploitation and abuse. It was at the legal aid clinic that I met dozens of people with stories similar to mine. Adult children who had moved in temporarily and refused to leave. Relatives who had pressured confused elderly parents into signing over power of attorney. Caregivers who had systematically stolen money and valuables from the people they were supposed to be helping. Each story broke my heart a little bit. But each conversation also reinforced my belief that speaking up had been the right choice. By sharing my own experience publicly, I was giving others permission to acknowledge their own situations and seek help. The Portland Tribune article came out in December, a long feature piece about elder abuse with my story as the centerpiece. The reporter had done excellent work, interviewing experts on financial exploitation and representatives from adult protective services. The article explained how elderly people are often targeted by their own family members, how the abuse usually starts small and escalates gradually, how victims are often ashamed to come forward because admitting your own child is stealing from you feels like admitting you failed as a parent. The response was overwhelming. I received letters from people all over the country sharing their own experiences. Some were currently in abusive situations and asking for advice on how to escape. Others had already broken free and wanted to tell me how my story had inspired them. A few were from elderly people who were just starting to notice suspicious behavior from relatives and wanted to know what warning signs to watch for. I answered every single letter. It took hours each day, sitting at my new desk with its view of the city, typing out responses on my laptop. I shared resources, phone numbers for legal aid organizations and elder abuse hotlines. I offered encouragement and validation. Most importantly, I reminded them that being old did not mean being powerless, that they had rights and resources and people who would support them if they chose to fight back. 6 months after the gala, on a rainy April afternoon, I received an unexpected visitor at my condominium. The doorman called up to tell me that Marcus was in the lobby asking to see me. My first instinct was to refuse, to tell the doorman to send him away. The restraining order had expired after 90 days, as is typical for temporary orders, but I had no desire to reopen old wounds. But something made me pause. Maybe it was curiosity about what he could possibly want to say after all this time. Maybe it was the tiny, stubborn hope that my son had somehow found genuine remorse. Or maybe I just needed to look him in the eye one more time to confirm that cutting him out of my life had been the right decision. Send him up, I told the doorman. But stay alert. If I call down and ask you to remove him, do so immediately. When I opened the door, I barely recognized the man standing in the hallway. Marcus had lost weight. His face gaunt and tired-looking. His clothes were clean but inexpensive, nothing like the designer brands he had been wearing when he lived in my house. His hair needed cutting and there were dark circles under his eyes that spoke of too many sleepless nights. "Hello, Mom," he said quietly. "Thank you for agreeing to see me." I did not invite him in. I stood in the doorway with my arms crossed, waiting for him to explain his presence. He cleared his throat nervously. "I am not here to ask for money or to try to justify what I did. I know there is no justification. I just wanted you to know that I am sorry. Truly, deeply sorry for everything." I said nothing, just watched him squirm under the weight of my silence. "Victoria and I are divorced," he continued. "She moved to California to live with her sister. Helen refuses to speak to me. I lost the few friends I had after everyone found out what I tried to do to you. I am working 2 jobs just to afford a studio apartment in a neighborhood you would not approve of." "Good," I said, and my voice was cold. "I hope you struggle. I hope you face rejection and hardship and the consequences of your choices. Maybe then you will develop the character you have been lacking your entire adult life." He flinched as if I had slapped him. "I know I deserve that. I know I deserve worse. But Mom, I need you to understand something. I was not always like this. Somewhere along the way I lost myself. I started measuring my worth by my bank account instead of my actions. I let envy and greed turn me into someone I do not even recognize." "When did that happen, Marcus?" "Yes. When did you stop being the boy who wanted to save the whales and started being the man who would betray his own mother for money?" He was silent for a long moment, and when he finally spoke, his voice was thick with tears. "I think it happened gradually. Every time you bailed me out of trouble, every time you wrote a check to solve my problems, it became easier to see you as a resource instead of a person. And Victoria encouraged that. She saw your wealth and convinced me we deserved a piece of it, that you owed it to us for some reason. But you let her convince you," I pointed out. "You made the choice to participate in that scheme. You made the choice to move into my house and take over my bedroom and go through my papers and plot to have me declared incompetent. Those were your choices, Marcus. Not Victoria's." "Worse." "You are right," he said, his shoulders sagging. "I cannot blame her or anyone else. I did this. I destroyed the most important relationship in my life because I was greedy and entitled and stupid." I took a deep breath, feeling the anger that had sustained me through so many dark months beginning to ebb. In its place was something more complicated. Not forgiveness exactly, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. "Why are you here, Marcus? What do you want from me?" "I do not want anything," he said. "I just needed to tell you face to face that I am sorry. And to tell you that seeing you stand up for yourself at that gala, watching you refuse to be a victim, it was the most ashamed I have ever been. But it was also inspiring. You showed me what real strength looks like, what integrity looks like. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to become someone who possesses even a fraction of those qualities. We stood there in silence for a moment, and I felt something shift inside me. It was not reconciliation. I was not ready to have my son back in my life, might never be ready for that. But it was acknowledgement that growth and change were possible, even for people who had fallen as far as Marcus had. I appreciate you coming here and saying this, I finally said. It does not fix what you did, and it does not mean I trust you or want a relationship with you. But I acknowledge that you said it, and I hope for your own sake that you mean it. I do mean it, he said earnestly. And I do not expect forgiveness or a second chance. I just wanted you to know that I recognize what I did was unforgivable. And I am going to work every day to be better, even if you never see it. He nodded. Then I wish you well, Marcus. I genuinely hope you find a way to become the person you should have been all along. But that journey is yours to make, and I will not be part of it. Understand, he said. Goodbye, Mom. And thank you for everything you ever did for me, even though I never properly appreciated it at the time. He turned and walked down the hallway toward the elevators. I watched him go, feeling a complex mixture of emotions. Relief that he had not tried to manipulate me or make excuses. Sadness for the relationship we would never have. A tiny, fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, he would actually do the work to change. But mostly I felt free. Free from the obligation to fix him or save him or sacrifice myself for his benefit. Free from the guilt and the doubt and the constant question of what I had done wrong in raising him. Free to live the rest of my life on my own terms, surrounded by people who valued and respected me. I closed the door and walked back to my living room, to the comfortable life I had built for myself. Through the windows, I could see the city spread out below, vibrant and alive with possibilities. That evening I had dinner with Rebecca and her family. My grandchildren Emily and James were growing up so fast, full of energy and curiosity and the kind of innocent optimism that had not yet been tainted by the world's cruelties. Watching them laugh and play reminded me why I had fought so hard to protect my legacy. It was not really about the money or the company or even the house. It was about showing them through my actions that people should be valued for who they are rather than what they can provide. That age does not equal weakness. That you never stop having worth and dignity simply because you reach a certain birthday. Rebecca and I stayed up late that night after her husband had taken the kids home. We sat on my balcony with glasses of wine, looking out at the city lights and talking about everything and nothing. Do you ever regret it? Rebecca asked. The way you handled things with Marcus. Do you ever wish you had tried to work it out privately instead of exposing him so publicly? I thought about the question carefully before answering. Every day I regret that it came to that point. I regret that my son made choices that forced my hand. I regret the years I spent enabling him instead of letting him face consequences. But do I regret standing up for myself and refusing to be a victim? Well, never. Not for a single second. Rebecca smiled and squeezed my hand. Because watching you take control of your life like that, seeing you refuse to be diminished or dismissed, it was one of the most powerful things I have ever witnessed. You taught me that being kind does not mean being weak. That loving someone does not mean letting them destroy you. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, mother and daughter, connected by blood and love and shared history. The good parts of my life had always outweighed the bad. The years with Thomas, building a business and a family together. Raising Rebecca and watching her become an accomplished woman and devoted mother. The friendships I had nurtured over decades. The artisans and craftspeople whose lives were improved through fair wages from Brennan Fine Jewelry. The clients who treasured the pieces we created for them, who passed them down as heirlooms and symbols of love. Marcus's betrayal was painful, but it was not the defining event of my life. It was a chapter, a difficult one, but still just a chapter in a much longer story. The years that followed brought more changes and new adventures. I became increasingly involved in advocacy work around elder abuse, testifying before the state legislature in support of stronger protections for vulnerable adults. I partnered with Silver Haven to create educational programs teaching seniors how to spot financial exploitation and protect themselves from predatory relatives and caregivers. My condominium became a gathering place for a circle of friends, mostly women of my generation who had also refused to fade quietly into the background as society expected. We called ourselves the Undiminished, a name Margaret had suggested with her characteristic flair for the dramatic. We met monthly for dinner and conversation, supporting each other through losses and celebrating victories both large and small. I traveled, finally taking all those trips Thomas and I had planned but never quite gotten around to. I saw the northern lights in Iceland. I walked through the ruins of Pompeii. I stood at the edge of the Grand Canyon and felt my own problems shrink to insignificance against the vastness of geological time. And yes, I even found love again, though that story is for another time. Suffice it to say that reaching 70 had not made me immune to the butterflies and excitement of a new romance, proof that some things truly are ageless. As for Marcus, I kept track of him from a distance through Rebecca, who maintained a cordial if not close relationship with her brother. She told me he had stayed at his 2 jobs for over a year, a personal record for him. He started attending therapy and joined a group for people working on their character defects and destructive patterns. He sent birthday and Christmas cards every year, simple messages with no requests or expectations, just acknowledgments of the occasion and wishes for my continued health and happiness. I never responded to those cards, though I did not throw them away either. They lived in a box in my closet, a documentation of his efforts, however inadequate they might be in the face of what he had done. Perhaps one day I would feel ready to reach out, to cautiously rebuild some kind of relationship. Or perhaps not. I had learned that I did not owe anyone my forgiveness or my presence in their life, not even my own child. What I owed myself was respect, dignity, and the courage to demand both from everyone around me. On the 5-year anniversary of that fateful gala, Margaret organized a celebration dinner at the same hotel where everything had happened. She invited everyone who had been part of my journey, from Rebecca and David Goldstein to Maxwell Green and Patricia Morrison from Silver Haven. Even a few of the legal aid clients I had helped over the years came, wanting to celebrate not just my victory but the inspiration it had provided them. As I stood to give a toast, I looked around the table at these people who had supported me, believed in me, helped me reclaim my life. I raised my glass and spoke from the heart. 5 years ago I thought my life was ending. I thought I was losing everything that mattered to my home, my company, my dignity, my very identity. But what I actually lost were the illusions I had been holding on to. The illusion that blood relation guarantees loyalty. The illusion that age makes you disposable. The illusion that kindness requires you to accept mistreatment. I paused, feeling the weight of every word. And in losing those illusions, I found something infinitely more valuable. Found my strength. I found my voice. I found the courage to draw boundaries and the wisdom to know I deserve to be treated with respect. Most importantly, I found all of you, people who see me not as a bank account or an obligation but as a complete person worthy of love and dignity regardless of the number of candles on my birthday cake. The applause was warm and genuine, and as I looked around at the smiling faces, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me for so many years. This was what mattered. These connections, this community, this refusal to be diminished by anyone or anything. Later that night, alone in my condominium with the city lights spread out below me, I thought about everything that had happened and everything I had learned. If I could go back and change the past, would I? Would I choose different actions that might have prevented Marcus from becoming the person he became? The answer, I realized, was no. Because every choice I made, every mistake and every success, had led me to this moment. To this life I had built from the ruins of betrayal. To this version of myself that was stronger and wiser and more authentically me than I had ever been before. I opened my laptop and began to type, wanting to capture these thoughts while they were fresh. What started as personal reflection turned into something more. A letter to other people going through similar situations, a message I wished someone had given me before everything fell apart. To anyone who is being diminished by the people who should honor you, I wrote, remember this. Your age is not a weakness. Your kindness is not permission for others to exploit you. Your love for someone does not obligate you to accept their abuse. You have the right to protect yourself, even from family. You have the right to set boundaries, even if others call you selfish for doing so. You have the right to demand respect, even from people who think they are entitled to treat you as less than human. And most importantly, remember that it is never too late to reclaim your life. Never too late to draw a line in the sand and say, no more. Never too late to become the fierce protector of your own dignity and worth. I saved the document and sat back, feeling a sense of completion. This was my story, my truth, my testimony to the power of refusing to be a victim. The next morning I sent the letter to the legal aid clinic where I volunteered. They published it in their newsletter, and it eventually found its way onto social media, where it was shared thousands of times by people who saw their own struggles reflected in my words. I received messages from around the world. A woman in Australia whose son had stolen her retirement savings. A man in Canada whose daughter was trying to have him declared incompetent. A widow in England whose late husband's family was contesting his will and claiming she had manipulated him. Each person thanked me for speaking up, for showing them they were not alone, for proving that fighting back was possible. And that, I realized, was the greatest victory of all. Not the money I had protected or the company I had saved or even the personal satisfaction of watching my abusers face consequences. The real victory was in becoming a voice for people who thought they had no voice. In standing as proof that society's attempts to render elderly people invisible and powerless could be resisted and overcome. I'm 75 years old now, 5 years past that pivotal moment when everything changed. My hair is silver. My face is lined with wrinkles that map out decades of smiles and sorrows, and my body moves a little slower than it once did. But my mind is sharp, my spirit is unbroken, and my determination to live life on my own terms has never been stronger. I look back on the woman I was, standing in my living room watching her son and his family move in with their suitcases and their schemes, and I barely recognize her. That woman was kind but naive. Loving but too willing to sacrifice herself, strong in business but weak when it came to family boundaries. The woman I am now would never allow anyone to treat her the way I was treated. This woman knows her worth and refuses to negotiate it. This woman understands that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let people face the full consequences of their choices. This woman has learned that you can honor the good parts of your past while firmly closing the door on the painful parts. Marcus is 48 now, still working his 2 jobs, still in therapy according to Rebecca, still trying to become someone he can respect when he looks in the mirror. I do not know if he will ever fully succeed in that transformation, and I have accepted that his journey is not my responsibility. I gave him life, raised him as best I could with the knowledge and resources I had, and showed him through my own example what integrity and hard work could build. What he chose to do with those lessons was always up to him. Victoria remarried someone wealthy, of course, and based on the occasional gossip I hear through mutual acquaintances, she has not changed at all. Helen passed away 2 years ago, and I sent flowers to the funeral though I did not attend. Whatever anger I felt toward her had long since burned out, leaving only a kind of distant pity for a woman who spent her life scheming for advantages that never brought her genuine happiness. As for me, I continue to wake each morning in my sunny condominium and feel grateful for another day. Grateful for my health, my independence, my friendships, my work, my family. Grateful even for the hard lessons that taught me who I really am beneath the roles and expectations I had carried for so long. The Riverside Mansion is thriving as a Silver Haven facility. I visit occasionally and am always moved by the transformation. Where my bedroom once held the tension of invasion and loss, there is now a suite housing a 90-year-old former teacher who had been living in her car after her grandson stole her pension. Where the living room echoed with conspiracies against me, there is now a gathering space where residents share meals and stories and laughter. Patricia tells me they have a waiting list of over 200 people now, all seeking the safety and dignity the house provides. We are working on opening a second facility, funded partly by donations I have made through a foundation I established in Thomas's name. The Thomas Brennan Foundation for Elder Dignity has become my new passion project, a way of transforming my personal pain into systemic change. Rebecca and I talk almost daily. Her children are in high school now, remarkable young people who treat me with genuine affection rather than obligation. They know the story of what happened with their uncle, told to them by their parents in age-appropriate ways as they grew older. I think it made them more conscious of how they treat elderly people, more aware that age does not diminish a person's fundamental humanity. And me. I am writing a book. This story you have been reading is part of it, but there is more. Stories from other survivors of elder abuse. Analysis of the social factors that make exploitation so common. Practical advice for protecting yourself and your loved ones. Resources for people who are currently in abusive situations and do not know how to escape. The book will be called Undiminished, after my circle of friends who refuse to let age define their worth. It will be published next year, and I hope it will reach people who need to hear that they are not powerless, that they have options, that they deserve better than what they are receiving. Sometimes late at night when I cannot sleep, I stand at my windows and look out at the city. I think about all the stories hidden behind those lit windows. How many other elderly people are being exploited by family members right now? How many are being manipulated and controlled and slowly erased from their own lives? How many believe they have no choice but to accept the abuse because society tells us that family is everything, that we must forgive and forget, that causing conflict is worse than enduring mistreatment? And I renew my commitment to being a voice for those people, to showing through my own example that resistance is possible, that boundaries can be drawn, that dignity can be reclaimed even when all seems lost. This is my story. The story of how my son tried to steal my life and how I fought back with everything I had. The story of betrayal and resilience, of pain and triumph, of discovering strength I never knew I possessed. But more than that, it is a story about refusing to be diminished, about insisting on your right to respect and autonomy regardless of your age, about the power that comes from knowing your worth and demanding that others recognize it too. I am 75 years old. I have silver hair and wrinkles and knees that ache when the weather changes. I have also built a multimillion-dollar business, raised 2 children, survived the loss of my husband, traveled the world, and stared down a conspiracy to steal everything I had worked for. I am not defined by my age. I am defined by my actions, my values, my refusal to be anything less than what I know myself to be. A woman of substance, of experience, of hard-won wisdom and unshakable dignity. And if my story helps even one person find the courage to protect themselves from exploitation, to stand up for their rights, to refuse to be diminished by anyone or anything, then every moment of pain was worth it. Because we are all undiminished. Every single one of us, regardless of age or circumstance, has inherent worth that cannot be taken away unless we surrender it. And I will spend the rest of my days making sure people remember that truth. This is my story. These are my words. This is my life reclaimed and reshaped on my own terms. And I am far from finished.